next guest doesn't need a long formal introduction. You all know who he is, Rob Dyrdek. We're going to do a little Q&A. Obviously, him and I have a lot of history together, but we're also going to talk about his history in business before I even came around, and then where that's evolved into now, because everything that he's evolved into and everything that he's doing with the Dyrdek machine is really, really incredible. And I think the main thing is there's a lot in there as far as what he looks at in businesses to build and be a part of, that I think you guys will really take away a lot of gems and a lot of stuff that you can apply to what you're doing. So here's Rob Dyrdek.
I'm on vacation every single day, every single day, every single day, every single day,
every single day, every single day.
Everybody sour like a
This is a song that I requested to walk myself out on. It was on my wife's playlist for like 5 years. Yesterday I did an Instagram video of dancing, and I was like, damn, what's that one weird song on my wife's playlist that gets me all fired up? And it was Dirty Heads Vacation. And I said, the DJ said, what can I walk you out to? And I was like, walk me out to Dirty Heads. And the idea of the song is every single day of your life is a vacation if you do what you love. You know what I mean? Beautiful thing to come out to. Anyway, thank you for having me.
All right, here we are. So, Rob, I think the good place to start is sort of, we have a lot of, I want Rob to see, if you're an entrepreneur or are planning to be an entrepreneur very soon, raise your hand. Okay, so there's
a serious one in the front row.
A lot of risk takers, a lot of entrepreneurs here. I want to explain to everyone your sort of beginning days into entrepreneurship or business. I think that when I moved out here 13 years ago, you were already very well known as a business-minded pro skateboarder. And you were making a lot of business moves, and it was sort of like, oh, Rob's the business guy of all the skateboarders. Now you've progressed way beyond that, but what were your early days in business or entrepreneurship? What were some of the first touch points you had?
Well, when I was 11 years old, I called the skate shop and said they were having an event, and I said, if I get 10 people to come to the event, will you allow me to skate for free? They had a mini ramp in the back of that skate shop. So I just cold called them and said, look, if I get people to pay to be to your event, can I come skate? And they were like, this is so random. Why don't you just come down? We'll let you skate. And I came down, I skated. At that point, they're like, God, you're really good for never skating a ramp before. But who I was introduced to was a guy by the name of Jimmy George. He was 19 years old, and it was his shop. And as I got really good, and he kind of took me under his wing, all he did was start company after company. He started fashion retail stores and multiple skate shops. He started a distribution company. He threw a huge pro skateboarding contest called the Ohio Skate Out. And it was sort of like in that mindset, in this like 12, 13, 14 years old, I was surrounded by people that all they did was start companies. So it felt like in my mind that was also what I was supposed to be a part of, right? And as I became better at skateboarding and turned pro, then the group from Dayton that I grew up with skating all started the Alien Workshop, and I was there when we named it and watched them build the entire company and all that. And then everyone around them, Mark Heinzman, built a clothing company and all this stuff. So to me, it was like in my DNA, I was raised by these weird entrepreneur wolves and just assumed that I was supposed to start a company too. And then at 17 years old, after I quit high school and moved to California, the very first thing I did was build a company, right? And that was a truck company called Orion Trucks. And I was super into conspiracies when I was 17. I was reading the Orion Prophecy, and I was like, ooh, that's a good name for a brand. And I had put together all the best pro skateboarders in the world and went to a manufacturer and said, here's the concept for a new truck company and all the pros that'll come along. And I did all that and launched my first company, Soup to Nuts, entire brand, and I got 0.5% of sales and $500 a month. And I was like, I made it. I'm a fucking.
That was because that's the deal that you did?
Yeah, I don't know anything about business. I was just had the wherewithal and the drive to like, I'm gonna create a business, but I didn't, now you quit high school, you're uneducated on what business, money, any of that aspect. You're really now a creator, right? Your mind is like, I'm gonna put this whole piece together. You're a network, you got all the skaters, you found the manufacturer, you put the whole thing together, but I was still too young to fully understand what would have been the right deal for me to do all that in the first place.
And then after that, I mean, you started a skateboard company called Seek. You started, I mean, countless, like, I don't even know the best way to do it. Do you want to run me through all of those early, like, investments or so many, or early companies?
I dabbled in anything under the sun in that era, right? Now keep in mind, as I was evolving, like, things were happening, and DC was coming alive, and that became this thing, and now I have more access to money, and now I'm starting record labels and truck companies and eyewear brands and just random skate shops. I was really just dabbling in every sort of thing that there is, trying to figure out like what was going to be like my big business. But I still again was less educated and didn't fully understand, but my drive just kept opening door after door, right? Like DC exploded, then I wrote the concept for Robin Big, and now you're on TV, right? And now you're on TV, and you saw what Bam did with all of his equipment and integration rights. Like now you go and start Rogue Status and all of these different things to capitalize off that media, and then DC blows up. So it was really like so many different companies and so many different styles back in that zone, but still nothing stuck outside of DC that became significant from that era.
So I think like, we'll obviously get into this more later, but what were you repeating that none of those things were sticking on a big level? Like how did you, I mean, you started so many companies and it seemed like you were sort of just hopping from one to the next to the next. Was there one fundamental error?
It was me. I was the fucking Achilles heel. It was that lack of business, right? Like I was all vision and drive and could see and wanted to create this idea, but I still didn't fully understand what business was. And that's why it would puzzle me, because it'd be like, well, why did DC work out and be so big? And then I began to look at like, oh, I need a business guy, right? So I'm the creative and like the brand guy. Like, I need a business guy, right? And when you don't even have a general lens of business, you're not very good at hiring the right business guy, right? And the people I surrounded myself that were supposed to be my business support just weren't very skilled either, but I didn't have enough general knowledge to know that they didn't know what they were doing either,
And then I want to talk about like, because then when I came in, I moved out here right before Robin Big and all that stuff started. One of the earliest memories I have is that it's possible to start a company. Because I see you starting all these companies, so it's like, okay, starting a company, that's doable. But also I remember thinking that what you were doing seemed so risky.
Yeah.
Like it seemed like you were putting a lot of money up for this thing. And I was like, okay, like I guess you want to start a company, but like this, you're pretty like immune to risk, it seemed like at the time. What part of that, what phase of that felt the most risky, peak risky?
Fuck. I mean, the thing that bums me out is I used to be proud of, like, I used to say, Dyrdek Enterprises, scared money don't make money, right? Like, I used to be proud of how, like, ruthless and, like, adverse to risk I was. And look, it didn't matter. I kept working so hard, and then Robin Big explodes, and I'm doing, like, renegotiating all of my deals with DC and Monster, and now doing all these big integrations and building brands through that media platform and making all this money, but I still wrote my own movie for skateboarding that I thought for sure was going to be a $50 million movie, so I put up it was supposed to a $700,000 budget that cost me $2 million. That was my own money.
With
right?
no sponsorship, no help?
Nothing.
And you wrote the whole movie?
And I wrote the whole movie.
And you knew nothing about the movie industry?
Nothing, okay. Other than the one person that advised me was like, you never put up your own money. And I specifically went to a meeting with investors, and the guy said to me, man, we love it. We know how big skateboarding was when we see that kid walking in the mall and he started rolling on his heels, right? And I was like, fucking heelys? Like, I'm financing this shit myself, right? Like, 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 so silly in hindsight, you know what I mean? And I was burned by it. But again, relentless pursuit. You didn't care, like you wanted to get the first real skateboarding feature film in theaters, and then look, nobody would distribute it. Then I bought theaters. I was like, fuck that. People just gotta see this shit. Fucking bought spent another couple $100 just to put it in theaters, and I swear to God, I'm still proud of, like, you can look on Box Office Mojo and there's like the top 100 cinematic like box office of the week, and I was like 94 with like 30,000, and I was like, fuck, that's pretty sick. You know, and I swear I lost $2 million in that, and I did a deal with this distribution company for YouTube, and I got a check for like $1,500 on like people watching on YouTube, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And they're like, what, it's like up for your movie street? You trying to tell me I'm working my way back down now? I got $1,500 towards the $2 million? And I've gone on to make almost $7,000 off that $2 million. So, but again, what's the through line? I didn't understand the business of it. I was, this has never been done for skateboarding. I want to create it. I wrote it. I'll put up my own money. And I did the same thing with Street League. I did the same thing with, you know, like, as I launched that thing, the whole world was like, that, like, especially the NBCs that were doing the Do Tour and the ESPNs with X Games, they were like, fucking good luck. Like there's no way you're going to be able to pull this off and get the sponsorship dollars. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, of course I am, right? Like, got all the best pros in the world. And I did, right? And then they were just like, wow, what the fuck, right? And so to me, it was still this, like, deep effort and, like, just relentless drive. And even when we built Fantasy Factory, you know, I put up literally, like, to make it extra sick, like, the budget again was $300,000, and I fucking spent like $800. And midway through the first season of Fantasy Factory, and they were basically like, this show sucks, we're not even gonna air it, right? And I'm like, God damn it, man, I fucking just put $2 million in this film. I fucking just, why'd I trick off 800 into this shit? Like, and I was against it at such an incredible level in that era, right? Because I had leveraged basically all the money that I had made into this sort of big moment of Fantasy Factory and Street Dreams and Street League, and there was an edge there where that whole thing should have just collapsed. But luckily for me, everything just kind of basically like dipped before going to this complete different level with that program as a whole.
So would you say that moment of being overextended on a movie, they don't even like Fantasy Factory, you just spent all that money, was that like the wake-up call moment for you? Like, hey, I need to learn business? Or like, when did that even happen? Because I know, once again, from being around you so closely, that there was like a real shift in you that happened. It wasn't like, it's been gradual over the last, you know, however many years, but it wasn't this long, gradual thing. There was a moment of realizing what you didn't know that forced you into where you are now. What was that moment that made you realize there was something you were missing?
Yeah, well, look, it wasn't that, right? You would have thought that would just tear a man down and put him on the edge, but it was like, no, I got to keep going. And it worked, right? So now you got to look at one point here, like, I own my integration rights. I was smart enough to say I wouldn't do another show without my integration rights. So now I was able to sell deals to Microsoft and DC and Monster and Chevy and do all these crazy things. You know, I got a cartoon on Nickelodeon. I launched Ridiculousness. It's a success. Street League's successful. I have this entire incredible, fully integrated, multi-platform universe of brands and media. And I was introduced to a guy that was like, you could raise $10 million. Your league is worth $30 million, right? And at the time, it had done like seven million in revenue, and I was like, it's worth 7 million, right? Like, what are you talking about, right? And they were like, no, it's like it trades, like the value of what a media events business could be worth $30 million, and it was this crazy eye-opening experience of of, wow, so you're trying to tell me I could get $10 million investment and have like a partner that could blow this up? I didn't know I thought a banker was like literally who you went to the bank and met someone that could give you a loan. I knew nothing about investment banking, nothing about venture, anything. And as I began to go out and pitch my league to get an investment and pitch myself as this fully integrated multi-platform universe of brands and media, they were like, we want a piece of everything you do. And I was offered a 360 deal. And at the time, the bankers made me sign a paper. It was like, okay, well, they're going to value you at 100 million. Will you take 50 million for half? And you get 30 and 20 goes into the company. I'm like, fuck yeah, right? And like,
But that's for all things Rob
everything.
Dyrdek.
They were gonna own. I was willing to give up half of everything I did for the rest of my life, right? I was like, fucking these like crazy partners, fuck yeah, right? So then they're like on the middle side, you get 40 and 20 goes to you and 20 goes to the company. I was like, fuck it, yeah. And then it was like, okay, on the low side, 15 into the company, 10 to you, whatever it was. I was like, absolutely. So it's on. We get these we go through the diligence period, and it was one of the most embarrassing, heartbreaking experiences of my life as a business person, because now this super sophisticated group of financial geniuses and entrepreneurs came in and ripped apart how I did and exposed me to me. Like, it was like, what a mess all my governance was and all my companies, and how I was running expenses through all this stuff, how I had some weird ghetto fucking accountant in Encino. Like, it was like, I created dummy companies in Nevada to avoid taxes. Like, I had my mom owned 2% of Millionaire Mindset that fucking was trying to divide up my pay, so I stayed in a lower tax bracket. Like, just a bunch of like hustler, no man's land horse shit, right? And it was devastating, because I always looked at myself as, even though I had all these kind of highs and lows through the entire thing, I always touted myself as such a business person. And when it came all the way back down, they basically offered to loan me money and put me on a salary with the right to buy half of me at a later date, right? And I just knew at that point right there that it was time now for me to completely rethink every single aspect that I know about everything I've ever done, and what business is, and what type of business do I want to do, and how do I want to know and learn, and everything that I need to know about financials and everything. So the next time I'm approached by a group like this, I vowed to my CEO at the time of like, I'm never going to need money from anyone ever again. When they look at it, it's only going to be to take money off the table, not to invest, and that's when I started on a journey to really learn everything that there is about business, And keep in mind, this is 6 years ago. You know what I mean? This isn't like, this is someone that's had incredible success and done so much. It was like, it's not like I did this and it took an insane amount of time. Like, that devastation was in 2013. And that's when I started the journey to create what I have today,
And so like that technically puts us right around the end of Fantasy Factory, right?
Yeah.
So the end of when, people kind of all can relate to that, when that was. So that's where you're at. Fantasy Factory's over. You have now had this awakening of all this shit that you need to learn. What was the process of actually learning it? Because now the way you talk about business and the way you get involved in startups and all this stuff is like light years ahead of where that was. You didn't go back to college. What was that process?
I basically went back to college via a lot of really expensive consultants. I really did. I wanted to learn it at the realest level. I hired a group called Arrive out of Seattle. I met with all these different consulting groups and basically said, I want to map out how to build I want to learn every single aspect of building a company. And literally I mapped out on my website now, I call it the 99 truths, like where I literally learned everything to do with every financial aspect, every operational aspect. Already understood brand stuff, but created a more elevated way of even looking at how it integrates into marketing. And really, I read a book called Start at the End. And it was a business book that's really like decide what you want out of a business before you start it and then build the map to achieve it. And that really changed my entire mind and everything. And from that point forward, I completely changed the way that I looked at business and what I expected to get out of it. And ultimately, it made me look at everything that I was doing in that entire era and clean everything out. Like I literally gave away almost every single company that I had, and everything that didn't connect back to sort of this clear path to liquidity or some sort of an exit event. Like I just got rid of it. And in 2016, I had finished fully developing my business system, if you will, that is the Dyrdek machine. And the only things that I had in 2016 is I had Street League and I had my production company, right? And in that zone, I knew that Street League was trading as an events business now. Like this is 1.5 times revenue. And so we turned it to an SVOD platform and a media business that goes from doing 4 events a year to 100 live events, and moved it from being worth 12 million to 35 million just by doing that, and raised 10 million to launch that SVOD platform. My production company did $200,000 in revenue in 2015. I sat with a guy that sold his company for $150 million, and he laid out like how structurally how he put this together and what needed to happen for it to happen. And then I designed it identically, and we did $50 million the next year, right? And in the sense of the first 2 things that I changed once I got into this mentality of like, building what your intent is out of each thing that you build, and what do you expect to achieve out of it, what value you're creating, and ultimately where is it heading in the scheme of your businesses, right? So if that happened in 2016, then at that point I just went on a firing frenzy of chaos, and I built company after company after company after company. I built a supplement company called Momentous. I built a plant-based snack food company, Outstanding Foods. I co-founded Black Feather Whiskey. I invested in a green algae encapsulation company that split off into called Chemistry, that did a split off into Made by Science for the marijuana version. A luxury bag company, a jewelry company. Every single one of these was done behind these new principles that I had developed, right? And primarily it was my new obsession now with tactical financial models and do or die entrepreneurs, right? Like give me like-minded, hardcore entrepreneurs, and then this super incredible financial path to success, all based off of a trade value or a path to profitability that we both set out together and made the goal of the company straight out the gate, right? Incredible 18-month run where I literally launched to go along with the 2 other businesses, like nine complete businesses on top of completely developing a handful of other businesses in that zone, right? That was sort of the depth of once I had figured out how I wanted to create businesses, then I just went one after another, and then guess what? I had to stop again. Because it's just like, holy shit, look at all the shit that you just did, man. Like, why is some of this shit working? Why is some of it not working? Like, why is some just exploding overnight? Why is some like having so hard to get revenue? Why is some out of money already? Like, I got this incredible data set because I just went and did so many companies at one time,
And so what I think the coolest thing is you go from explaining it like you were kind of shooting from the hip in the early days and just going for it, to now it's so refined. Now you're on version 2 and it's so refined. And I think the coolest thing is you're also really clear like the connection of how you talked about in your story, you were always around these people that were creating businesses. And you're very clear now that you only want to be involved if you can be involved in that process. You don't want to be an investor and just throw money at things that seem interesting. So can you run me through like what you look for? Let's just say everyone in this room was about to pitch you. What do you look for your involvement where you can really add value and it's interesting to what you do?
Look, and so what I learned from doing so many businesses over this last couple years, and keep in mind, even in the chaos of this wild success, right? We're Made by Science sold for 160 million this year. Chemistry merged and with Cure Pharmaceuticals, and it has a 50-50 merge, and this at a market cap of like 380 million. We're in the final stages of selling Super Jacket, our production company, and selling Street League, like the craziest, like most insane level of success in all that. But I still knew that there was a better, sharper way to build these businesses with better intent, and it became incredibly clear, right? And that's what led me to create the machine method, almost like the process 2.0. And what I realized is I needed to set principles at the very beginning, right? And so I have 4 principles that every single idea goes through, right? The first is do or die leadership, right? And understanding like the individual, like do they have the wherewithal and the understanding, and do they have good founder market fit, right? What I was finding is a lot of times I'd launch businesses with people that didn't understand the industry, and like the learning curve was so steep, right? And then they didn't fully understand the fundamentals of business. Like you would find a lot of CEOs that are super creative that don't understand sales, or really operational and financial minded guys that don't understand brand and product, right? Like you end up kind of needing to assess these people's ability that you're going to partner with through the 7 fundamentals of business, which is product, brand, integrated media, sales, marketing, operations, and finance, right? Like I had to shift how I even looked at businesses. So I start there with that assessment. Then give me a white space idea, and white space is thrown around a lot, and it can be done in a lot of different ways and be incredibly nuanced. But I can tell you something like pig out chips, that is a pigless bacon chip, is something that gets massive overnight because it's unique and undone in the space, versus like black feather whiskey, which has no clear differentiation outside of marketing, which takes a lot longer for it to take hold. You begin to kind of see, I'd have great brands and ideas like that have a guy that's like an amazing creative guy that just really cannot operate a business and has no idea how to sell the product, right? It is again why I assess that. And in the white space, you want to give yourself an advantage, man, in the sense of like knowing that you're giving a unique value proposition to a consumer, and it can be slight. There's a lot of different things like that constitutes white space, but the more original you go in with something, the better shot you have at it sticking. And then for me, give us a clear path to liquidity. We want to design 100%, like whether it's a high margin business that's got a targeted consumer that has low cost structure that can be profitable, that we split a dividend, or a high, in the case of something like Made by Science, it's a green algae encapsulation for THC that creates a baking powder for THC. It's sold for 160 million on the IP without even like ever selling a product, right? Like, and again, the innovation in the IP made it such white space that in a market now that's so rabid and growing at such a high pace, there was that sort of clear path to liquidity that we looked at as like the real opportunity in it. But I want to know from the very beginning, what's the return profile on this, and we even put a cost structure to everything, where we look at every single one of these businesses I did. It was almost identical. They needed a few $100,000 to be prototyped. They needed about $1.5 million to $2 million to find product market fit, and they all ran out of money because they either didn't have enough money, or it took it took them so long to get to market, and they didn't have revenue already built in, and so like your product's behind and you're burning money and you don't have enough capital. That's where you kind of struggle, right? So now we stage capital in a much more methodic way of testing, and we don't burn any money till we've done all of our more agile testing, and then make sure we're fully funded to give it its best shot of finding product market fit, which means you found growth, which means you will be able to get investment to scale, right? And then for us, we come in as co-founders, we set a price, and we invest along the way, and we say, hey, this business trades at 3 times revenue. We want to get it to 30 million and sell it for 100 million in 5 years. We will come in as a co-founder, do the entire pre-seed round at an 800 pre. We end up with 60%, put 10% in the option pool, 2.5 million in the seed round. We're diluted now down to 48%, 4 million in the A round, and now at exit at 100 million, we own 32% of it, and we expect our investment profile in that is that we will invest $250,000 and make 32 million, right? Super fucking sophisticated now from a guy that didn't know business, right? And that lens is how we look at everything. And then our fourth principle is unfair advantages that lead to revenue, right? Why was I able to do to take a company from 200,000 to 50 million in 1 year? It's because of my relationship with the network, and I had a television show, right? So I could just say, well, I negotiated to get the actual unfair advantage that I could negotiate and own the production and put it into the production company, and all the relationships I had to be able to go and sell shows. It's like anytime you can have like not just unfair advantages in the market, but unfair advantages that lead to revenue is really everything that I look for. And then as I go to build it, like I do not build anymore unless, you know, I call them the elements, and it's customer led, like using who you're creating it for and where do they live, and that informs like the brand design, that informs the product design, that informs the media strategy, that informs the marketing, that creates the sales strategy, that's bound together by the operational and financial plan, all pieced together by a leadership team that understands all of these 7 core fundamentals. That's how I look at a business now and how I design it before I ever put a dime in. Meaning that like unless we have a CEO that has general knowledge in all 7, which the only one of our companies that does is Bill Glazer from Outstanding Foods. Like he really just understands every single one of the core, and he's hired great people to support it all. Then we wait. Right? We wait till we have someone who's there that can fill, like a lot of times we have a creative CEO that's a great product and brand person that doesn't understand sales and marketing, so we'll try to find a sales and marketing person, then a director of operations that has a financial background to kind of fill out that sort of core leadership engine to manage the seven core fundamentals before we actually even launch the business, right? And again, it becomes this much more beautiful sort of process in creating it, because it's like you're still making all these agile, hardcore moves that come with launching a business because it's incredibly difficult, but your foundation now is set up for you to have a lot better chance of finding success than if you do what I did my whole life, what most everybody in here is going to go for. Is you're just gonna be like, I got a fucking idea. That shit's sick. Let's fucking do it, right? Like that's basically like every entrepreneur ever, outside of like a really hardcore MBA business educated mind who then goes the opposite way. It's like, oh, look at the unit economics, and like we gotta. And then it's like their brand shit, right? Like that's sort of the world of what creating businesses looks like, and the range of how it can be done. And for me, I just want to become a master of curating individuals and ideas from an idea stage. Like, I just love talking to someone about, like, damn, that would be sick. Then let's go to the data and then look at the market and just begin to shape it and evolve this. Then look at the unit economics and how do we build this as a high margin, decide, like, is this an omni-channel or direct to consumer? So how are we going to get earned media and unfair advantages to bring down customer acquisition costs and create demand creation in order to drive this business to become successful at a quickly efficient way? Because business, I swear to fucking God, is only fun when the shit works. Like, I swear, it is like, everybody talks about, like, oh shit, it's the grind, man, we grind.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, from the guy who came dancing out to my occupation is vacation.
yeah, like, when the shit's fucking working, everybody's like, sales, when you're fucking selling shit, everyone's like, fuck, we fucked up. You can fuck up all day long, but as long as you're fucking selling stuff, it's really, really enjoyable. But it's fucking, the hard work is worth it when it's working. When you keep running into a fucking wall and you don't understand why it's not working, it's one of the most, like, painful experiences as an entrepreneur, because you keep, like, you don't take the time to sort it out because you're too in the fire trying to survive, right? Like, that's sort of the problem of if you enter the game lacking any of those 7 fundamentals, because lacking any of them could be detrimental to a business. And I'll give you an example about you. Give you an example about
me?
you. Yeah.
Okay.
So, to give you an idea of, like, where my principles apply to Young and Reckless, right? It's like, you know, you were the idea and the brand and the creator, right? It's like, I have this concept, you know, like, and then what was the unfair advantage to create revenue was ultimately the media, right? So you had this platform where you could create a product. You went out and found 2 operators, right, that were also sales-focused guys that already had the experience, and D had the discipline of having this crazy margin discipline, right, of demanding a 60% margin, and so what it allowed you guys to do is your customer acquisition and demand creation was 0. Right? Because you had the integrated media already from the television, it was on a focused consumer. You built the brand and product for a focused consumer. Those guys handled the operational and financial side. And then you had this incredible path to liquidity because all the revenue that generated, your cost structure was so low, you guys got to split these beautiful dividends.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So in a sense of, even when I go back and assess my good friends, like, companies and their success, I ran even them through my principles. I began to run like anybody's business, like, and everything that was successful that I had knowledge on that validated sort of these principles, and how I began to look at business and how now I build everything through this lens and this much more methodic pace that will yield a much more likely form of great success, you know. Didn't see that coming, did you?
Wow.
Man, you know, you probably didn't even remember. I remembered those 60% margins. Those stuck with me. It stuck with me for years, and I didn't even fully understand it till like 2 years ago.
Okay, so how about this? Because time goes quick.
Yeah.
I want to play a make-believe game to make this easier. Let's pretend that everyone here is going to leave here today, and they are going to, we're part of some crazy challenge, and in 6 months, they're going to come back to try to get investment from you. What check boxes, what do they need, what advice do they need, what do they need to know before they go try to figure out what that is and how to pick a winner that you're going to be into, and you're just going to take off into the next level?
Well, look, I think, you know, I go back to the white space principle. Like, you just can't ever, like, you really want to look at a space, look at the size of it, and make sure that the concept itself, even if it's a nuance, even you want to do a new version of an RX bar, and your dad's homies got a new bean that's like high in protein and got caffeine in it, but it's like born in the ocean, you got something, right? It's like, and you put that into a bar, now you look at like, damn, the bar market is 7.4 billion and energy bars is a 2 billion market of that, and the biggest player in energy bars is doing $100 million. I really believe that this could be a $30 million business that trades at 3 to 4 times revenue. We could sell this to Kraft for 120 million type of thing, right? I know that's way a little bit too technical, but I believe if you can look for unique IP and a clear differentiator and a target market that you fully understand, it would be the most likely path to success, right? And even if you just are passionate and find your own idea that you want to develop, decide what type of business you want and what you want out of this business, right? I'm not saying you need to go and try to sell it for 100 million, 200 million and try to go public, but you should set out from the beginning of like, hey, I'd like to do this t-shirt business and make 300 grand a year, right? Well, then that means that after all your expenses, your employees and everything, that thing needs to profit 300 grand a year for you to make that money, right? So if you work backwards and like, oh shit, like I only need like 100 retail doors and 10,000 core customers and sell this many product to them at this margin, and this is over time my customer acquisition costs will go because it's targeted, and then I can have a $2 million business that kicks off $300,000 to $400,000 a year, and if I could do that forever and play tennis with my homie, I know nobody in here plays tennis.
D does.
If D does?
Yeah.
Show of hands of tennis players.
There's D.
Yeah, it's okay.
D in the white
okay.
hoodie.
Maybe I was just like thinking. Look, I'm almost like basing this off of his like podcast, his like one where like he was like, do you want to go through the stress of growing a business or have like a manageable lessons about your lifestyle, right? That's probably why I fucking honed in on tennis.
Yeah. And
but
tennis just feels successful.
Yeah, but it's also the truth. Like you're not everybody has like relentless fucking crazy ambition, and you want to know what you're sacrificing for while you're building your business. Like if you're going hard, you gotta have a clear understanding in that path to what that goal is. It's essential that you design it from the back forward, and regardless of if that's for a giant exit or just to be profitable so that you can have a great lifestyle and live a great life. Like it's just one of the most essential things that there is, and really you gotta obsess over the numbers, man. I so many creative people and people with ideas, like you've got to learn numbers. You've got to like teach yourself what the actual core foundational financial elements of your business that will determine its success, because it's the only way that you could begin to wrap your head around how you would make your creative moves inside what's really smart, right? And it's the more you learn it, like the more you will just be able to judge where you're at and make adjustments inside that to ultimately achieve what you would hope to achieve with whatever you're creating.
That's all the time we got.
That's it, man. Anybody got any good ideas, just let me know.
Thank you.